And speaking to a number of dentists, especially in the holistic and biological realm, a big part of the oral microbiome, as well as, of course, of the gut microbiome, is diet. It's what you're feeding it.
For sure.
Yes, you don't want to kill it. You shouldn't use those types of mouthwashes and everything. But, looking at it from a duality of oral microbiome and NO, right? What type of a diet is one that you would recommend for people to look at both of those?
Well, number one, it's elimination of sugar and simple carbs because when you consume a lot of sugar, it changes the pH of the saliva, completely changes the ecology of the microbiome. And that's where you get the spirochetes, you get the caries causing bacteria, you get the gingival plaque that causes periodontal disease. And so we have to maintain an optimal pH and change the ecology so the good bacteria can populate and create these biofilms and generate nitric oxide. So number one, that's the biggie. And then number two are nitrate-rich vegetables, primarily green leafy vegetables. This, we think, acts as a prebiotic because these are facultative anaerobes that can respire on nitrogen in the form of nitrate and reduce it from nitrate to nitrite because we got to remember nitrate is inert. And so if you don't have the right oral bacteria, if you eat green leafy vegetables or there are companies out there selling you a potassium nitrate capsule, it's inert in humans. If you don't have the right bacteria, you excrete it in the urine and the feces and you sweat it out. And so with 2 out of 3 Americans using mouthwash, fluoride in 73% of the municipalities, most of these products don't work and they can't work because they just don't have these people don't have the right oral bacteria to metabolize it into bioactive nitric oxide. And so that's the challenge. A lot of companies out there selling so-called nitric oxide products, but they don't work in the end patient or the consumer because these companies are either naive and don't understand the science, or they're intentionally defrauding their consumers. And so that's what we have to maintain, the integrity of the field, and understand the limitations in each patient and what products can or cannot work. And but no, it's a huge problem because as the awareness around nitric oxide improves, more companies are entering this space and creating products that cannot and do not produce nitric oxide.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on there's a number of influence out there and people that are kind of pushing for more carnivore type diet, staying
Yeah.
away from certain vegetables, pointing at oxalates and possibly contamination in these vegetables. I mean, what does the science in your mind, let's not even go with opinions here because there's a lot of those out there. What
Yeah.
does the science show on things like leafy greens, oxalates? What's the net benefit versus net harm?
I think it's individualized. I think the data, if you look at data with overt people with really obstructive coronary artery disease, and you put them on a plant-based diet, and this is the work of Caldwell Esselstyn and a lot of these plant-based cardiologists. But the data on plaque regression with a plant-based diet is pretty damn convincing, right? So, but it's not. I'm not a big fan of these extreme diets, plant-based, straight carnivore. I think it's a mix, and we have to get our nutrients from a diverse source. But there's certainly, risk of oxalates, and beets. People associate beets with nitric oxide, and beets are not nitric oxide, and beets are high in oxalates. It's a peasant food, and so we have to get away from this concept that beets are nitric oxide. Because
Let's jump into that really quick because
yeah,
I've heard that so much,
yeah,
right? You put out, I'll post something about a NO supplement, your own, and I'll get a bunch of people coming back, yeah, but high in oxalates.
yeah.
It's almost that thing. It's like, oh, can you answer that? How would you answer that if someone's like, but high in oxalates?
Well, number one, beets are not nitric oxide. I think
Yeah.
it's a deceptive marketing ploy by many companies out there. But look, again, you got to look where it started. And in the early 2012 Olympic Games in London, it was revealed that most of these Olympic athletes were drinking liters and liters of beetroot juice because several years prior to that, there were research labs, some colleagues of mine, that were publishing that a standardized nitrate beetroot juice could enhance exercise performance and improve athletic performance. So these early adopters, these well-trained athletes, take this and it improves their performance. It was based on the published clinical data. So then a lot of companies started selling beet juice, beet powders. And so I started testing a lot of these. In fact, all of them. And most of them provide no inorganic nitrate or nitrite. It's just what we call a deadbeat product. The only thing it does is it causes kidney stones, it causes your urine and your feces to become pink, and it causes a lot of anxiety because people think they have urinary bleeds or colon bleeds. But and still, that's today. I see these companies advertise on TV about beets. I mean, you can't turn on the TV without seeing this. And I've tested these products, and they provide zero nitric oxide benefit. It's the cheapest beet powder that they're putting in these different delivery forms and calling it nitric oxide. And it's a very dangerous proposition because I wake up every morning, just this morning, and I get emails saying, "Hey, Nathan, we saw you on a podcast and you talked about nitric oxide and how important nitric oxide is, but I've been taking this beet product now for a year or so, and my blood pressure hasn't improved. My energy hasn't improved. I've seen no difference. So, nitric oxide doesn't work for me." And I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's a very dangerous interpretation. Nitric oxide always works. But you have to understand, beets aren't nitric oxide, and the beets that you're taking provide no nitric oxide benefit. So it's no wonder. So nitric oxide didn't fail you. That company and that product failed you. And so if this continues and we have regulators and policymakers and people in the FDA who are reviewing nitric oxide-based drug therapies, which we're developing, and they get this interpretation that nitric oxide is not important, then it could kill the entire industry. And I'm convinced nitric oxide is the future of medicine. There's not a single indication where nitric oxide wouldn't be beneficial at the right dose in the right patient. So that's a very dangerous, and I hold these companies accountable, and many of these companies have sued me because I demonstrate and reveal that the products don't work. But you know what? I'll take it on every day because we have to maintain the integrity of the field.
Absolutely. And I do have to say, working in this field and being around it for my whole life with my father being involved and, seeing so many of the doctors that are pioneers in this field, such as yourself, it really is shooting yourself in the foot when you have people come in and start to lower quality, make bigger claims, and hurt everyone involved, right? And I've seen that happen with just cheap IV pop-ups, right, that come along or anything, and you start to bring down that quality, you don't see the results, and then everyone is hurt because you're dragging down the people that are doing it properly.
Yeah. No, and that's my commitment. I was spent 20 years in academia and then turned entrepreneur because I've seen it, I've experienced it, where you have so-called business people come in and they put profits over science. And they cave in to, the profits of the business rather than letting the science lead the way. So, I've made a commitment in all of my companies. I will never abdicate my position as founder, chairman, and CEO to some guy because science will always lead where our products go. And we'll never bring a product to market that doesn't activate, stimulate, or produce nitric oxide and lead to the body's ability to produce nitric oxide. Because I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it because nitric oxide is the future. It's going to change the world, and we're going to be the ones to do it. And other companies have lost their way. Start it, but then, get off path and realize that there's more profits in creating inferior products and selling it to a larger database rather than let science lead the way and create products that actually work.
Medicine and wellness have become big business, right? And that attracts a lot of VCs, and VCs want quick profits and they want lower costs.
Exactly right.
They don't really care too much about results. They can market it well if the pioneers already prove the results, right?
That's right. And look, I've experienced it, I've seen it, and that's why
I'm sure.
I've had private equity and venture capitalists come in and want to participate in what we're doing. And, it's always a hard no. I don't need their money. I don't want their money, and I want no association with them because, like I said, what I'm doing, I'm not building this to sell it. I'm not building it for the money. I'm building it to leave a legacy and change people's lives.